So introduction to Saradullah.
So shall we start now?
Yes, please start.
Good evening, doctors. With great pleasure from Shield, we welcome each one of you for today's webinar, which is going to be taken up by Dr. S.K. Das. The topic is again a very interesting and a new topic. OHSS free clinic, can it be practically possible, is the line in which doctor is going to take up today's webinar. And I thank Dr. S.K. Das for sparing his time today. And it is great pleasure for me to introduce Dr. S.K. Das to all of you. Dr. S.K. Das has done his MD FSCOG and he is the director of Swagat ERT Clinic in Bongaigaon, Assam. Dr. S.K. Das is the organizing secretary of NeoGSCon for the year 2010 and currently he is the president of IMA Bongaigaon. Dr. S.K. Das has got a lot of publications to his credit. He has got more than 11 publications in both national and international journals. And he is a faculty in various national and international conferences. And I am sure today his presentation is going to add a lot of value to you. Going to be very interesting. At the end of the session, definitely, he will be responding to all your queries and doubts related to today's topic. Once again, I thank Dr. Das for sparing his time and over to Dr. S.K. Das for today's session. Thank you very much, Doctor.
Very good evening to ladies and gentlemen. My welcome to all the esteemed viewers. First of all, let me thank Shield Healthcare, especially HR Balaji, who has spoken many good words for me. And also I thank him for giving the opportunity to speak before you in such a wonderful digital platform today. So I am speaking from Bongaigaon. It's about 200 kilometers away from Guwahati, Assam. I want to share slides. Okay. So this is a part of the land which is famous for one-horn rhino. India, all of you know. So when I am told to speak in this topic, the overrun hyperstimulation syndrome, pre-clinic, can it be a reality? What I believe that those who have faced this situation, even once in a life, in their practice of ART, they must be dreaming to have this overrun hyperstimulation free practice in their future days. It is not because the mortalities that happen, of course, very small mortality. I think it is due to the morbidities that happen to the patients and consequently a very tricky, uneasy, awkward situations our service givers as an ART specialist are to face. So even the patients and patient attendant may start asking you, have you given some overdose? Compromising my safety. So this is a real issue for the ART specialist basically. So what overrun hyperstimulation is exactly? It is a serious and potentially life-threatening complications of the ovulation inductions, which is an integral part of the IVF procedure. And the syndrome is characterized by ovarian enlargement and there is a shift of fluid from the intravascular to the extravascular space. That is the third space we call due to the increased capillary permeability. And this leads to the fluid collections in the peritoneal, pleural, even the pericardial cavities in severe form of ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. And it may dearrange these hemoconcentrations. There may be electrolyte imbalance. So the pathophysiology is not very much well understood and it is not clear. So main things which is responsible for causing this situation is the vascular endothelial growth factor. Apart from many things are there, which is secreted from this luteinized granulosa of the follicles on the exposure of this HCG hormone, which may come from the exogenous source when he uses the trigger, and when it comes through pregnancy, that is the endogenous HCG. So first one we call is early OH when you use trigger, and early and late ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome when endogenous HCG comes from the pregnancy, that is trophoblastic cells start secreting HCG. This VEGF, that is vascular endothelial growth factor, is main mediator. Apart from this, there are other interleukin factors are also there. Namely, there may be angiotensin, aldosterone system, LH, histamine, prostaglandins, ovarian prorenin might play a role in the development of the ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. So I have talked about this VEGF is a main mediator, and it is secreted from the luteinized granulosa cell of the follicle on the exposure of the HCG. HCG has a long half-life which potentiates the severity of the conditions. And there is also fact there may be genetic predispositions. When the VEGF receptors are mutated, there may be overexpression of the VEGF secretions. Even there may be mutations of the FSH receptors. Ideally, the FSH should act on the FSH receptors. But when the receptors is mutated, the other hormones may also act on these receptors, maybe thyroid stimulating hormone, maybe LH, maybe HCG. So even mutations is also factors when we talked about these genetic predispositions. So what happened, the VEGF, which is secreted from this ovarian origin, from the luteinized granulosa cell, then act on the receptors or the VEGF receptors that lie on the endothelial cells of the blood vessels. What happened? This determines the downstream signaling that augments the vascular permeability. The final effect seems to be related to changes in the actin fibers and the cellular shape, which in turn may be due to the factors such as rearrangement of the endothelial junctional protein like vascular endothelial cadherin. So there will be increased capillary permeability. The intravascular fluid, whatever inside this vessel, will come out to the extravascular cell and the cause the problem. When you talk about the classifications should be meaningful. Why? It should be feasible to the treatment purpose, prevention purpose, and other management purpose, even with the prognosis. So unfortunately, whatever classifications we have gone through, we have received till today, the requirements are not met. But when you talk about this classification, it may be on the basis of onset, whether it's early and late. Little bit I have said about early and late onset ovarian hyperstimulation. When you talked of the cause, spontaneous and iatrogenic. Spontaneous ovarian hyperstimulation is very unlikely, and iatrogenic, that is a doctor's made conditions, what we call, that is due to the medication that you have used in the control ovarian hyperstimulation, so-called control, it becomes uncontrolled. So on the basis of severity, when you talk, it may be mild, moderate, and severe. Mild variety we have eliminated from this. Why? Because mild ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, you talk, it is a natural things to happen with these procedures of control ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, your procedure. So mild variety, many people keep, many people do not keep. So about this early and late onset, when you give the HCG, if this ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome happens within 3 to 9 days, and ovarian's response, then it is called early ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. When pregnancy happens, the trophoblastic cell starts secreting HCG. And it is also maybe responsible, it may be also responsible cause of ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. It is not the time, it is also a type of hormones that I have said, which is exogenous, endogenous. Endogenous may continue for a long time, even it perpetuate. So it is more severe when you talk about the severity among two, the late one is more severe. So we call, if you are 5 years old, you are no more. But here, something different. This classification was made, Golen et al. In 1981, about probably more than 30 years. Still it is relevant, and still we are very much comfortable with these classifications. With this classification, they have categorized mild, moderate, and severe. When you call mild, abdominal distension and discomfort, fissures of grade 1 plus nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and ovary may go enlargement of 5 to 12 centimeters size. This is a natural things. When you do an inductions, ovulation inductions, it is likely to happen. Nothing to worry. Only assurance is sufficient to give to the patient. Moderate ovarian hyperstimulation, fissures of all these mild one, and there will be ultrasonic evidence of the ascites. So when you do clinical examination, you may not get the ascites. When you do this clinical ultrasound, then only you will get the ascites. Severe one, that is a fissures of moderate ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome plus clinical evidence of ascites and hydrothorax, and there may be breathing difficulty. When there will be dearrangement of the hemoconcentrations, coagulation abnormalities, and there's hypotension, diminished renal perfusions, these sort of things will cause grade 5, that is a critical ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. This hemoconcentrations is important to assess. That we'll talk about this hematocrit value. So here another classifications of severe ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome and critical. In both types, the ovaries are enlarged, hydrothorax, but in critical one, pericardial effusion happens. Hematocrit in severe one in between 45 to 50. It is more than 45. But in critical one, it is more than 55. And there may be, in a critical one, there may be thromboembolic phenomenon for which we are very much worried, and there may be adult respiratory distress syndrome. So accordingly, we'll have to give this management. So I have said a real effort to achieve the consensus on the classification of ovarian hyperstimulation by a panel of experts should be made. A consensus classifications would allow both the scientific community and the patients to make a much more sense of the vast amount of knowledge and experience that has accumulated over the years of ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. So anyway, we are to meet the requirements. When we talk about this incidence, you know, before 1960, there was no ovulation induction drugs. The first drug, that is clomiphene citrate, came in the market in 1961, probably, if I remember perfectly, 1961. So with these medications only, these situations comes. Before IVF, the reported incidence using gonadotropin. Gonadotropin came to the market in 1978. So with this advent of gonadotropin, the ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome in mild form, it was 8.4 to 23. Moderate from up to maximum 7%, and severe from almost 0.008 to 10%. With clomiphene, moderate form and severe from almost rare. And with this IVF practice, the severe form for which we are worried, it comes at a 0.1 to 2%, and moderate one is 3 to 6%. So why do we want ovarian hyperstimulation free clinic? I have said the mortality is not very much worrying, 3 deaths per lakhs. So only things in the introduction I have said, the morbidities that happen to the patients and the parties, and consequently even to us for these awkward situations. And it is also a fact, the ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome reporting still remains a gray zone with a major underreporting. And if you talk about this economic cost, when you have planned this IVF with a budget, if the patient develops this sort of complications, the budget may derail. This is also one of the problems with this ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, both for the patients and the doctors. Can we afford such situations? Definitely not. Mortality from ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome is unacceptable. Although a rare complication, each ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome death is a disaster that could have been avoided. That is the important things. This can be avoided. So we should focus on it. The balance between the desire of the pregnancy and the patient's safety, I will add one another word, success is the top priority. Safety is the top priority. The introductions of the ovarian hyperstimulation free clinic cannot be postponed. So goal of infertility clinic is redefined. We do need success, but not in cost of making these patients suffering. Zero ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome we want, and singleton life part of the healthy baby at term, definitely. So our purpose is not to treat, to not hope and to treat the ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. Rather, we want to prevent it. So the management strategies, yes, predictions, prevention, and management. Predictions is also a part of the prodromal part of the prevention. So prevention part is divided into primary prevention and these secondary preventions. When you talk about this management, I will not go through details of the managements of the part. Still, I will hurriedly finish some points in management. This is in nutshell in the overview of my next part of the presentations. Predictions, risk factors for the development of ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. If you predict, then you can prevent, then you can save. So you will have to know some your conditions which can alarm you, such polycystic ovarian syndrome. You all know they are the strong candidate to develop this ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. Elevated baseline AMH, 10 AMH, 10 horrible. So how much you do need AMH? This is also not standardized, but it is said that above 3.5 probably this is the patient may go for the ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. In the introductions, I have said many factors working behind the ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, that is genetic factors also. Even at the low AMH, patient may develop ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, not below the 3 probably. Increase ovarian volume. I'm not talking about this ovarian volume with cyst and other things and your solid tumors. It's probably, I mean antral follicular count on the baseline scan. And age less than 30, very important, younger age group are very much prone to develop this ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. Low body weight index. Previous ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, very important history. So history can guide. Previous ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome means that probably there is genetic influence. High dose of FSH. If you use high dose, you should be cautious. Large number of oocytes collected. If you retrieve more than your follicles that expected, 25. This is not standardized, of course. What does it mean? You are having lots of corpus luteum. So HCG can play on it So that's why large amount of oocytes also one of the factors. Rapidly rising and high steroid levels. This is a parameters to predict you, to assess that this patient may develop ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. On contrast, again I am mentioning, even with the low steroid level, the patient may have ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. So prevention, when the disease is not understandable completely, how can we expect complete prevention of ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome? It is not possible. Prevention strategy can be divided in two types, primary and secondary. When you have not landed, it means primary. When you have not induced, you have not started ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, you are just suspecting, then you can go for this primary prevention method. Stimulation protocol is individualized. You individualize the protocol. You should be a great tailor master. For which patient we will give which amount of dose, which your protocols you will choose. That things you will have to think as a primary prevention method. So secondary, you have induced. Now you are suspecting something probably go wrong. Then you will have to take care of this patient and some risk factors arising from an excessive response to the ovarian stimulation. So primary prevention, you have some options, insulin or sensitizing agent. We all know metformin, chironositol, myonocytals. Reducing dose of gonadotropin, can be one of the methods to adopt. Generase antagonist protocol, choosing this protocol, very important, because these protocols nowadays we are all practicing. It is feasible for the extremes, even for the poor ovarian reserve, even high ovarian reserve. So nowadays we are more comfortable than before. Previously we used to go for the long protocol. Low dose of HCG, recombinant HCG and recombinant LH are also options. Alternative agents to HCG, we'll talk. Avoiding HCG for luteal support, we have a very good tendency to give the HCG as a luteal support. Even in the normal pregnancy, we do give HCG 5,000 or 10,000 weekly, like that we give. And IVM, that is a heteroocyte maceration, is a newer technique. Still we are in the infancy period. We have to do many things on this part. And if it comes really true, definitely it will be good for all of us. So insulin sensitizing agent, metformin is a king drug, all of you know. Cochrane database of the systemic reviews 2040 says, metformin suppresses the insulin level and decreases the ovarian androgen production with improved ovulatory rates. So it helps in ovulations. Metformin treatment before or doing ART cycles decrease the risk of ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome in PCOS. We know many insulin sensitive agents like myonocytol, we give 2 grams twice daily for 3 months before we start these IVF cycles. It improved the oocyte control quality. Oocyte retrieve pickup is very good. So with myocytol group, and with myocytol group, you can expect very matured oocytes, M2 oocytes, and degenerated oocytes chance is less if you prime this patient with myonocytol. Proper dose, of course, and your quality of the embryos you can expect good. So significantly lower the recombinant FSH. So with this myonocytol, you can expect that your dose requirement may be reduced because increases the sensitivity, and it decreases the PE2 level at HCG administrations, and it significantly higher number of follicles with diameter more than 15. So you can expect follicles more than 15 if you use myonocytol. So myonocytol prevents ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. It lowers the peak E2 levels at HCG administration with a minocytol therapy, significantly higher number of follicles with diameter of more than 15 millimeter. So this is a study. Experts have consensus that clinical data demonstrate efficacy of minocytol D-chironisol in treatment of HCG. So 4 important parameters: dose, ratio, formulation, and compliance. When you use the minocytol D-chironisol, this ratio is very important. So another strategy, that is a reduced gonadotropin. You can think to reduce this dose of gonadotropin if you suspect the ovarian hyperstimulation possibility. Chronic low dose step-up protocol is better probably, even for the pregnancy point of view. It reduces the incidence of ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome when you compare with the high dose regime in IUI cycles. We're talking about these minimal stimulations and natural cycle of IVF. So using recombinant FSH instead of urinary FSH have no effect in reducing the incidence of ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. Many may think that if the use of recombinant, the incidence of ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome is more. In reality, the evidence says do not support. So GnRH antagonist protocol, this has made ourselves in very convenient positions. Cochrane database of systematic reviews in 2011, the use of antagonists compared with the long protocol, GnRH agonist protocol, was associated with large reduction in the ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. There is no evidence in difference with live birth rates. That is a good thing. The added advantage being possibility of using agonists instead of HCG to the trigger to final oocytes. That is very important. We want to avoid HCG. Here you can avoid with this antagonist protocol. Another things I have said that with antagonist protocol, the patient's preparations, it is not very much lengthy. But if you go for these long protocols, these patients needs long preparations. Another thing, I will tell you later on. So low dose of HCG and recombinant LH, you can think of it. Low dose, trigger of oocyte maturation with low dose of HCG in high-risk patients reduces risk of ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. No evidence of difference in between the recombinant HCG, recombinant LH, and urinary HCG in achieving final maturations, follicular maturation I'm talking, with the equivalent pregnancy rate and the ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome incidence. Yes, we are very much interested to talk about GnRH agonist trigger today. Use of GnRH agonist instead of HCG for trigger results in a lower incidence of ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, but extremely high early pregnancy loss due to the electrolysis. This is the disadvantage with use of agonist protocol, because there is an early deuterolysis. So they need very much meticulous support, LPS, to avoid this LPD. Luteal rescue is still possible with low dose of comparable, low dose of HCG. You can give 1,500 international unit, comparable pregnancy rate and minimal risk of ovarian. So here is a place of dual trigger. GnRH agonist could be useful for cryopreservation and donor and recipient cycles. So if we want to avoid ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, you can segment the IVF procedure. You can postpone your embryo transfer later on. You just retrieve, make the embryo, preserve it. Of course, your laboratory should be very much equipped for cryopreservations, and there is no difference. Many people want to say FET success rate is more. So this is the time to tell no to HCG trigger, at least for ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. I believe those who have faced ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome in the severe grade, probably they will always want to avoid HCG as trigger. Another novel alternative that has come, that is a kisspeptin. Actually, it is not a new things. This kisspeptin is a group of what we said neuropeptides. Out of these neuropeptides, kisspeptin 54 is important in the because in the reproductive axis. It secretes from this your neuronal cells and affect on the hypothalamus to secrete GnRH. So ultimately, it is an agonist type of trigger, but it comes from the neural cells above this your hypothalamus. So it is also can be used as a trigger. And with this trigger, we have evidence that incidence of ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome is almost zero. Avoiding HCG for LPS. Progesterone, HCG, or GnRH agonists are used for LPS, but use of HCG was linked to significantly higher risks of OHS. I have said that HCG should not be used as a supportive measure for luteal phase defect. We always use progesterone, and progesterone is the best support. But estrogens also use as a support, particularly if you use GnRH agonists as a trigger. Meticulously, both estrogen and progesterone are to be given if you use agonists as a trigger. Progesterone seems to be best option as LPS in the high-risk patients without the risk of ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. So, in vitro macerations, an attractive strategy to prevent ovarian hyperstimulation in PCO patients. It involves earlier retrieval of the immature oocytes. We retrieve the small follicles and takes the oocytes out and make them matured outside. Of course, your laboratory should be very much equipped with this macerating media and your cryopreservations. Secondary preventions, I have talked already that you have induced, now you are suspecting something goes wrong. How to do it? Will you do the cycle cancellations? It can be done, but it has some disadvantage from the financial point of view, and you may cause lots of frustrations to the patients and the parties, even you also. Costing, okay. Costing involves withholding of the further gonadotropin stimulations and delaying the HCG administered until E2 level P2 or decrease significantly. Costing means just withdraw your ovulation inductions for some days. You should not go beyond 4. If you go beyond 4 days, probably success rate of pregnancy will be very much compromising somewhere. So costing means just withdraw and see whether E2 level is coming down or not. Once E2 level comes down, you can start. So there was no evidence to suggest the benefit of using costing to prevent ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome compared with the no costing or other intervention. So even with costing also, you may not be able to prevent the ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. Cryopreservations, I have said, it's the best way probably, provided you will have to segment these IVF procedures. Involves the freezing all the embryos, all freeze technique. Early ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome may occur, but it almost eliminates the late ovarian hyperstimulation, which is severe one. Though reduced pregnancy rates from the frozen thawed embryos was a concern, the introduction of the vitrification technique shows promising result. Albumin and hydroxyethyl stars, these two things we can use as a treatment purpose also, as a prophylaxis purpose also. There is limited evidence of benefit from the intravenous albumin administration at the time of oocyte retrieval in the prevention of severe ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. Personally, I use albumin, but albumin is very costly. Hydroxy-style ether is more cheap, and it is more, I think, good than this albumin. When we talk about this, your infectivity point of view, where a hydroxy starts markedly decrease the incidence of ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, and this is a cheaper, potentially safer alternative to the albumin. Dopamine agonist. We use nowadays cabergoline as a prophylaxis purpose. Cabergoline appears to reduce the risk of ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome by phosphorylations of the VEGF receptors. This is the mechanism of actions. 0.5 milligrams daily you can use for 8 days post HCG trigger. The use of cabergoline does not affect the pregnancy outcome, or nor is there any increased risk of the adverse effect, birth defect. Calcium gluconate, this is another option. You can go for that. Calcium gluconate in 200 ml saline for 3 days post-ovum pickup can effectively prevent severe ovarian hyperstimulation and decrease the OHS rates. Another newer option, that is relcovaptin. It is an V1A antagonist. Among the novel therapies being investigated for the prevention of ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, the vasopressin V1A receptors antagonist, relcovaptin has been studied for the ability to inhibit VEGF by modulating vasoconstriction and vascular smooth muscle proliferation. Relcovaptin in an hyperstimulated rat model has shown lower concentration of the VEGF-A in the peritoneal fluid. So this is a newer option. You can go for that. So on conclusion, if we go, yes, recommendation is this: reducing the gonadotropin dose. Another recommendation, generase agonist at ovulation trigger, always safer. Adjuvant therapy, metformin, D-chironicetol, myonicetol recommended. Cabergoline, yes, very good. So utilize, reduce gonadotropin durations. When you use gonadotropin for shorter durations, the chance of OHS is less. If you use HAS, that is hydroxyethyl starts, is very good. It can be used for prophylactic purpose, treatment purpose, cryopreservations, excellent option. But you will have to segment this, your IVF procedure, cycle calculation, yes, still is an option, because safety is more important than even the against success. And you will have to individualize the control ovarian stimulation where our failure is there, because the whole things we do not understand properly. So further research required. HCG as an ovulatory trigger, further research required, whether we at what dose it can be optimum to use as a trigger to avoid this ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. Further research is required. Posting, again, you can go for research to refine it. And vasopressin V1 receptors antagonists, we have already talked. Again, we do need more information on it. So hurriedly, I will go. Time, how much? So 6 minutes. Yes, those who have faced these situations, they should know about this management also. The management of ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome is supportive, and admission to the hospital is reserved for cases of severe ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. Outpatient management is usually possible in a women with mild and moderate ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. So it can be treated as an OPD patient, as an indoor patient. If it is severe form, definitely you will have to hospitalize. So daily fluid balance daily weight, guard, check, regular blood and scans. You will have to ultrasonography can be very much deciding whether to admit, not to admit. To know these conditions properly, you may have to use this analgesia. So luteal support is very important for this ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome to support this pregnancy. Hydrations, drinking to trust, not to the excess. Many people, already there is a fluid in that heart space, so why we are taking so much of fluids? But fluid is required sometimes. So you may have to give parenteral also. But another thing is the diuretics is contraindicated because it may cause stroke even. So there may be more hemoconcentrations while using fluid, maybe orally or parenterally. You should be very much cautious. Activities, strenuous exercise, sexual intercourse, and as injury or torsion to the enlarged ovaries can occur. So you should avoid it. Bloods to be taken each visit to know this your blood profile, at least coagulation profile. So ascites, if it is a tense one and is causing respiratory distress, you may have to do this paracentesis. If the symptoms do not resolve and severe ovarian hyperstimulation develops, hospital admission should be considered. So parameters I have said. So these are the suppurative measurements. Prevention of thromboembolism. With ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, thromboembolism is a dreaded complications. Venous thromboembolism is less common in ovarian hyperstimulation than the arterial one. 2/3 are arterial one. And cerebral, middle cerebral artery thrombosis is a common occurrence with this ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. So these are the things. Drainage of ascites, I have said, to relieve, and the pain, you will have to give analgesia. Yes, about this thromboembolism, I have said, prophylactic anticoagulant therapy you can start. Even with the moderate ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, you will have to give in a severe one, definitely. But even with the moderate ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, prophylactic dose of anticoagulant therapy is very important. Your hematocrit value will be very deciding factor to start. So hydrations is very important. I will hurriedly go. Plasma expenditures, I have said there is hydroxy, it has 6% solutions. Albumin is available, your 20%, say your in 100 ml, 20 gram, you may be used up to the 60 to 100 grams. So drainage of ascites, pain relief. Yes, I have only 4 or 5 slides. So this is a case actually I faced. The case was induced by someone else. When the patient came here, I got this patient was having huge distension and there was respiratory distress. There was a hypotension. When I did sonography, I got both these ovaries were hugely enlarged, and I suspected torsions. And her BP was down, SpO2 was down. So I was forced to this laparotomy, and she was pregnant 14 weeks around. She was 29 years old female. So I did laparotomy in this case. So diagnosis was made, it was a torsion ovary bilaterally. And when I asked about this ovulation induction, I got, it was induced by a gynecologist with clomiphene. So I was surprised to see this ovulation ovarian hyperstimulation in such conditions. So I did laparotomy. I got both these ovaries were devitalized. I tried to detwist it, but it was no always blackened. But I kept somehow some portions of this ovarian tissue in the left ovary, and this pregnancy was continued, and she has delivered about 6 months back. Though it was a success story, but still it is horrible. I do not hope and pray no one should face. Maybe it is a success story, but really we want to avoid this sort of ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. Thank you.
So thank you so much for a wonderful session. Very, very well covered. So very practical with a lot of depth.
I have taken more time.
No, sir. Absolutely fine. No problem with the time. It is very, very nice and elaborate, sir.
Thank you, Balaji.
So this is Dr. Kiran.
Yes, Dr. Kiran, please speak. Yes,
sir. With this, I would like to open up the discussion for the audience. You can type in the questions in the chat,
right?
Which I can read it to sir. Sir, meanwhile, we already received some questions. If I can ask you those questions while the audience type the questions, sir.
Please.
Sir, can you throw some light on what are the different foods which can be taken naturally to prevent OHSs?
Oh, it's a very good questions you have put. Actually, we doctors do not want to speak about these foods, right? We want to speak your medicines only. That is the problem with us. So we know this high protein diet is very much helpful for those cases who have developed ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. Because if you give, in my practice, I give always to take eggs, is white portions of the egg, and fish, if she can take, that is a good. If he's a non-vegetarian, it's okay. If he's a vegetarian, then she will have to take the animal, your non-vegetarian protein. So high protein food is very important. Along with the hydrations up to her trust. So this is very important. Next, please.
Thank you, sir. Sir, the next question is, you spoke about agonist trigger. So what are your thoughts on the advantage of the agonist trigger over HCG, apart from preventing OHSs?
Okay. Sometimes we have heard this, many ERT specialists tell, how can I know my trigger is working or not? When you give the HCG, there is no way to assess whether your HCG is working or not. If the HCG is not working, on the day of ovum pickup, you will find that my oocytes are not matured. Even there may be empty follicular syndrome. Maybe due to the drugs, maybe due to the your exact intrinsic cause. So you never know whether your trigger is working or not. But when you use agonist trigger, that is this agonist trigger will act on to secrete LH and FSH endogenously from the pituitary gland. So if you have a baseline LH, and after 12 hours, if you measure the LH, if it is more than 15, then yes, your trigger is working. What in my practice, I am very much comfortable with this agonist trigger because I can assess the quality of the trigger. This is added advantage. Apart from, you have said already, because because with the agonist trigger, ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome incidence is less. Yes, please.
Thank you, sir. So the next question is, you spoke about cabergoline. So can you throw some light on how does actually cabergoline help in preventing OHSs?
Cabergoline we use as a prophylactic purpose. If we suspect ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, we may start from the day of ovum pickup even. From ovum pickup, the mechanism of action, it is not clearly understandable, but it is stated that it phosphorylation of these VEGF receptors, it causes phosphorylations. So it prevents the liberations of the VEGF. Thereby, it reduces the incidence of ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome.
Thank you, sir. Sir, the next question is, if HCG is the culprit, why is it that with increasing HCG, every pregnancy does get complicated with OHSs?
Oh, I don't know who has asked it. This is very good questions. What I believe, to make a football game, you do need football and playground, both.
Definitely,
HCG is a football. but playground is the corpus luteum, right? So in normal pregnancy, you do not have so much of corpus luteum, but if you have induced, you are making lots of corpus luteum, and you have allowed this football to act on the corpus luteum, the HCG to act on this corpus luteum, and allowing VEGF to be secreted and to cause ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. This is literally I am making you understand, probably get my point.
Definitely, sir. So the next question is, sometimes we usually see this multiple follicular development during an IUI program, posing a threat for hyperstimulation. So if this situation comes, how do we go about managing this situation, sir?
Yes, sometimes you may get while doing this IUI, you may get more follicles, more than 3, 4, 5, sometimes even 8, 10 follicles also. So in this case, you will have to decide whether patient will have this predilections or had chance for development of the ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome or not. That things you will have to decide. You will have to individualize this case. You will have to make counseling with this patient and parties. Say with this amount of dose, I was not expecting this amount of follicles, although I was doing IUI. But you can convert it to the IVF if they permit you. Even with these expectations of the ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, that things you will have to make understand. So you are making this patient more comfortable to go for the IVF with reductions of the cost. You can retrieve, you can make embryo if you are at least you can segment this IVF. You can do the embryo transfer later on. FET you can do. So this way you can go for that. If the patient has already developed multiple follicles and you are doing IUI, probably your success rate is not good, because if these multiple follicles have developed, your IUI success is also compromised somewhere. That things you will have to make these patients and parties understand, because I didn't expect so much of follicles. So the success rate with this multiple follicular development in IUI is less. That thing will make these parties and patients understand to choose, even they can go for the IVF.
Thank you, sir. Sir, you spoke about prevention. You shed a lot of light on that. So what are the precautions we should take during stimulation for IVF and post pickup of a PCOS patient?
Please speak again.
Yes, sir. Sir, you spoke about prevention for OHSS. So the next question is, what precautions we should take during stimulations for IVF and post pickup of a PCO patient?
Yes, PCO patients are the strong candidate to develop ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. So that things you are well aware. So preventions you will have to take in the different level, primary, secondary, whatnot. Even before IVF, if you give the patients a course of metformin or dechiroinositol or myoinositol at least for 3 months, that may be a good idea. People give, I have seen OC, oral contraceptives, for at least 2 to 3 months, minimum 1 month. This is also maybe advantageous. Why? It will increases the sensitivity of the FSH. By this way, you can reduce the dose of follicle stimulating hormone, and you can cut short your cost. That is also important. So other management, I have said already, that is a primary prevention. All these prophylaxis you will have to take, starting from reducing the dose, even the cancellations if you land up in the bad situations, and you will have to select the agonist trigger. You tell no to the HCG and you choose the protocol, definitely antagonist protocol, and you can use cabergoline from the day of ovum pickup, and even you can give the calcium gluconate, I have said. So these are the policies you will have to take if you are inducing a PCOD patients. And constant monitoring by ultrasonography. Ultrasonography, it is very important. Though you just make this person understand, though you are a doctor, you do not know how this ovary will respond. In what dose the ovary will respond, how much, you do not know. So this is empirically we are doing. So you will have to agree as a doctor also, as a patient and party also. That things should be very clear. Yes.
Thank you, sir. Any more questions, sir, doctors? Sir, Dr. Sunita thanks you for the presentation.
Okay.
Sir, I had one question generally, sir.
Please.
Sir, if you see a IVF practice,
Right.
how common is this OHSS, sir?
OHS mild variety is very, very common. I have said we have eliminated this mild variety from our classifications. Right? It's very common. About 30 to 40, if you tell, it's okay. And it also depends which case you have induced. If it is a young one, definitely you will have this ovarian hyperstimulation mild variety. If the patient is not with a poor ovarian reserves, probably you are not in the problem. So which case you are dealing, that matters. If the AMH is 10, you will definitely develop the ovarian hyperstimulation at its mild to moderate variety. So, so from the incident wise, if you want to tell, that I will rather tell case wise, which case you are dealing, that matters.
Sir, Dr. Vijayalakshmi tells nice discussion, sir.
Thank you, Lakshmiji.
Any more questions to sir, doctors? Okay, sir. So, sir, actually, I would like to thank you on behalf of Shield Healthcare for spending so much time with us and enriching our knowledge about this OHS, which is very, very important. Normally, sir, we have a lot of PCOS talks, but this topic is very, very relevant today. As you pointed out that this is very common and you put a lot of strategies with your experience and case discussions. So I would like to thank you first, sir, for sparing your time and giving this lecture. Thank you so much, sir, for this opportunity as well. And thanks to the audience also for listening to, sir. Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Kiran. Thank you, Balaji. And thank you all
the
viewers.
Thank you, doctor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you very much, doctor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.